Hello there. Before we delve into today's deck tech, I'd like to say a few words about why this build is a little bit special for me. I've always liked Phyrexia's storyline, and Yawgmoth is such an interesting character, but as a budget player with no more than €5 per card rule, his card was always painfully out of reach. But since my birthday is in July, I decided to spoil myself a little bit and maybe bend my own rules. What I'm trying to say is, I have sinned. Then I sinned again, and for good measure I sinned some more. I promise I'll more than make up for my transgressions in my next video, which I'll talk about more at the end of this one, along with a small channel update. Now let's get back to business. First off, I'd like to explain why I call the deck Yawgmoth Thran Diviner. This is because of the flavor text of the card Bog Raiders, coming all the way back from Urza's Saga. It contains an excerpt from the Phyrexian scriptures, also known as Phyrexia's core philosophy.
Let weak feed on weak, that we may divine the nature of strength.
And this is exactly what we're trying to do. The deck runs a vast amount of weak and cheap experimental creatures that we can sack and draw cards. The list includes Blood-Soaked Champion, Code Conscript, Persistent Specimen, Reassembling Skeleton, and Skyclave Shade, which can recur themselves by spending a modest amount of mana. Other creatures leave another one in their place, thus allowing for even more commander activations. Those include Nest Enshambler, Carrier Troll, Discordant Piper, Doom Dissenter, Mere Sire, and Orzhov Enforcer. Novice Occultist and Dusk Legion Zealot are two creatures that do similar function by drawing an additional card either on ATB or on death. Last but not least, I run Ophiomancer and Ghoulish Procession that can make a token once each turn. The enchantment is in a peculiar place. On one hand, a card like Jadar Ghul of Nephalia has the advantage that it makes a token without any condition, and itself being a creature that can be cast for a card at any point. On the other, Jadar triggers only once per table rotation and costs around €3, while Ghoulish Procession can trigger up to 4 times per rotation, which is not as difficult as it seems, because we have a lot of creatures that can recur themselves at instant speed and even more non-token fodder as a whole. As a bonus, the card costs next to nothing, and at least for now I'll stick with it. But this is just the first batch of glorious test subjects, which help us acquire much needed knowledge in the form of cards. The second to lie on our table has proved more resilient and displays an undying desire to advance science in any and all directions. These creatures can be used at minimum to draw 2 cards, but more importantly can be looped infinitely if paired either with another undying creature or with some of the cards I'll mention in the next section. Said loop is the main win con of the deck, and in conjunction with other cards, it can draw the entire deck and drain everyone for the win, or at the very worst act as a Yawgmoth's bargain, in the sense that we can exchange life for cards in our search for either answers or win cons. Treacherous Pit Dweller deserves a special attention. The card is tricky to use, but on the flip side costs 2 less than something like Demon Lord of Ashmouth, which is easier to use but also has a stack cluttering ability and limitations. There are 2 main things regarding the card and our loop. The first is that Treacherous Pit Dweller has to be used at instant speed, meaning it can be used to draw for another combo piece that is itself expected to be cast at sorcery speed, say a Blood Artist. The second very important aspect is that Treacherous Pit Dweller cannot be looped with another undying creature because of the way triggers are put on the stack. Despite this, the card works with all other loop sustainers as normal, allowing us to combo. Speaking of cards that sustain our loop, those are Genesis Chamber, which makes a mere token whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, and Desecrated Tomb, which makes a bad token whenever one or more creatures leave our graveyard, such as due to triggering Undying. Cards like Pawn of Ulamog, Sifter of Skulls, Ogre Slumlord, and Open the Graves trigger whenever non-token creature dies and produce a token, which can be sacked to draw a card, and put a -1/-1 counter on the undying creature, thus allowing us to sack it again and sustain the loop. Blight Mound does the same, but I decided to separate it from the rest because of how good it synergizes with our strategy, as the pest token that the card produces gains us 1 life on death, which allows us to dig deeper into the deck if we are not already fully comboing off. Last but not least is of course Nest of Scarabs, a card that makes Decree of Pain look like draft chaff in this deck, by allowing us to wipe the board and draw a bunch of cards while doing it, and as a bonus can also soft lock our opponents from playing creatures. As expected, since our main loop revolves around placing -1/-1 counters on undying creatures, the card also sustains our combo. It is important to know that all these cards are not mere combo pieces, but also provide value whenever we sacrifice one of our fodder creatures. As you have probably noticed, all this fiddling around, sacking and drawing cards is nice, but that does take a toll on our life total, and does next to nothing to our opponents. Enter Yawgmoth's Lab Assistants, Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, Ayara, First of Lochwain, Falkenrod Noble, and Vindictive Vampire. Whenever a creature dies, this card drain one or all opponents, and we gain 1 life to continue the loop to infinity. Ayara is a special one, as she triggers on a black creature entering the battlefield, but all our undying creatures are black, and half of the loop sustainers also make black tokens, so 50% of the time it works every time. Of course, every respectable laboratory is nothing without vials with various liquids, and this particular one works perfectly with our cleric commander. Having a Bastion of Remembrance is also important, not only to win the game, but also to remember the brave souls that gave their life for science. I would shed a tear if I could. The next 5 cards work in similar way, but have some limitation that stop them from infinitely sustaining our loop. Those are Death Greeter, or as I know him, Todesbrusser, yay foreign cards, which can sustain our draws infinitely, but can't win us the game by himself. As I already covered, Blight Mound's Pest only produce half the life needed to fully sustain our combo, and Thran Executioner Thran sadly triggers only once per turn, which makes him more of a value card. On the other hand, Psychosis Crawler and Sir Conrad the Grim can win us the game by draining everyone, but cannot sustain our life infinitely. Our infinite loop is fine and all, but sometimes things can get repetitive, or our opponents could start moaning that playing against our deck has been quite the bitter ordeal, akin to playing some degenerate storm deck. So why not spice things up with some alternate win cons? Bitter Ordeal is a sorcery from Future Sight that has a unique keyword, Gravestorm. What was the name of that mechanic again? Storm. Gravestorm. This keyword plays exactly like Storm, with the difference that it creates a number of copies based on the number of permanents that were put into a graveyard, any graveyard, instead of spells cast. And boy do permanents go to the graveyard. The spell can be used as a spicy tech card to deny a player their combo piece, or simply exile any and all win conditions from our opponent's decks. The death count can be amped up either by loop, mass sacrifice, or board wipe. Bonus points if you make a loop with Death Greeter, and instead of killing everyone, you exile all their decks. Bonus points if you kill 2 opponents with Blood Artist, and exile the third one's entire deck with Bitter Ordeal, because the real treasure was the friends we lost along the way. But who needs friends anyway, when you can always awaken the erstwhile in Stamp Perilous foil, or maybe some classic foil mind-slicing action. The best part is while everyone wallows in their empty-handed misery, you can easily redraw to a full grip. But before you unlike, unsub and unfollow, know that while the deck may be entirely black, my heart isn't, and I found it in myself to add a fun card like Liliana Heretical Healer. which makes a zombie when we flip her into potentially game-winning emblem, which we can reach through some proliferation. Alternatively, she can also recur a potential combo piece or value card from the yard, or wait, what is her first ability again? You can plus her to make everyone discard a card. Oh, how nice! The deck runs 2 micro packages, one including our fast mana rituals like Dark Ritual, Urza Saga printing only of course, for that lovely flavor text, Songs of the Damned, and Carrick Son of Yawgmoth. Technically Carrick isn't really Yawgmoth's son, nor exactly a ritual, but I like his flavor, and he still can help us cast a ridiculous number of spells we normally couldn't. I'm considering adding Cabal Ritual if I manage to get one, that is, but that's in the future. The second micro package is Reanimation, and includes a nerf, which is very cheap draw 2 for 1 black at floor level, but can also grab a win con from the yard, as long as it costs 3 or less mana. Victimize is my second choice, as it's cheap and provides great value, by even having the possibility to grab 2 undying creatures that were milled, discarded, or removed. Last is another classic, in Dread Return, which is also relatively cheap and can be flashed back from the yard at the negligible cost of 3 creatures. The deck runs a somewhat modest amount of removal, mostly because our commander works as removal, our discard win cons work as severe disruption for the opponents, and overall we aim to be the one who knocks, so to speak. For single target removal I chose Defile, Tragic Slip, and Feed the Swarm, and for mass removal, Black Sun Zenith, which is a bit of a pet card of mine, but has synergy in this deck, as if something goes very wrong, it can even be used to prevent us from decking. Nevinyral's Disc is our main answer to artifact and enchantment heavy decks. Last is Phyrexian Scriptures, which is very thematic and versatile removal, where we can let it sit on the battlefield and tick away, or pay double black and discard a card with Yawgmoth to immediately go to chapter 2 and wipe everything else. As a bonus, it acts as another graveyard hate against our opponents. Drawing cards is one thing, but casting them is another, so the deck runs around 11 ramp spells. Most are obvious choices, such as Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Charcoal Diamond, Cold Steel Heart, and Mind Stone. Astral Cornucopia and Everflowing Chalice are 2 mana rocks that synergize with Yawgmoth's Proliferate ability to make them more powerful. Decanter of Endless Water provides colored mana and unlimited hand size. Next are 2 creatures-based ramp spells, one is Leaden Mere and the other is Solemn Simulacrum. Being creatures is important because we run cards that synergize with having overflowing graveyard, and of course they can always be cashed in for extra cards with our commander. Last is Black Market, a card I found myself running in an ever-increasing number of decks. It has amazing synergy here, because creatures are dying left and right, which in turn adds counters on the enchantment. Those counters can further be proliferated with Yawgmoth, but more importantly, can give a massive mana boost in our first main phase each turn, which would certainly come in handy to cast even more spells and draw even more cards. For the mana base, as you noticed in my intro, I got myself both a Cabal Coffers and Cabal Stronghold, which were great with our swamps. I also run somewhat similar card in the face of Crypt of Agadeem, which can produce 1 black mana for each black creature card in our graveyard, alongside Thespian Stage, because the only thing better than 1 Cabal Coffers is 2 Cabal Coffers. Some more utility lands are Blast Zone, which provides much needed removal for problematic permanents, Bojuka Bok as graveyard hate, Khan's Bastion for proliferation, Mirrored Landscape for ramp, and Reliquary Tower. The rest of the mana base is entirely composed of 24 swamps, 23 of which are basic, and the last being Witch's Cottage, which also provides minor recursion value. And that is all you need to divine the nature of Strength, which apparently means playing aristocrat/combo decks, who knew. Before I say cheers, I'd like to do a somewhat brief channel update. The reason I haven't been doing more videos recently is because of a special episode I'm working on, which started as a normal deck tech, but gradually evolved into Rule Zero partner pair, until finally morphed into entirely flavor build with its own short story, written by yours truly. During this period of concept change, a few time-consuming intros were made and unfortunately scrapped. In the end, I realized that finding material to show what I wanted to show would not be possible, because my story is essentially fanfiction. This meant only one thing: I would have to create the material myself. And thus for the last 10 or so days, I have been learning how to draw from scratch. You may laugh, but this is something I always wanted to do anyway, so I decided to give it a go. At this time I will not reveal who the partner pair is, or other elements of the story, but will instead leave you with a rough draft of one of the commanders. Can you guess who that character is? Write your guesses in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching. Cheers!